Because the difference between us and a Giphy or Tenor or something else you can do is you know that you can pick any card in our catalog and it will get a laugh on the other side.
Welcome to Behind the Numbers Brand Anatomy, an all-new eMarketer podcast that looks under the hood of your favorite brands, made possible by VTEX. It's September 29th, and I'm your host, Insider Intelligence Briefing Director, Jeremy Goldman, and this is the show that gets inside brands and dives deep into one of their recent campaigns or discusses the ROI behind a new technology they've adopted. Today, we're talking with Paul Hangis, the CEO of JibJab. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Yeah, great to be with you. Thanks for joining us. Here's what we have on deck for you all today. First, a speed intro where we get to know our guest in 100 seconds or less. Then Tell Me Something I Don't Know, where yours truly and this week's guest will bring a number, stat, or study that we find particularly fascinating and or relevant. And then we jump into this week's case study, how JibJab listened to consumer sentiment during the pandemic to improve its product and reinvigorate its brand. All right, Paul, time for your speed intro where we get to know you and see how you think on your feet. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, 100 seconds on the clock. Our producer, Victoria, will be timing you. Your time starts now. First off, where are you from?
Currently live in Los Angeles, but born in New York.
What does your company do?
We're a digital greeting and social expression company.
Okay, nice and succinct. I like it. What is your primary goal at JibJab?
This one's easy. Our goal is to make billions of people happy.
And what do you drink first thing in the morning?
Oh, it has to be a cup of coffee. I actually have a hard time trusting people who don't.
You've got over a minute left. You're doing well. If you had to move to a new city, where would you go?
There's always been a special place in my heart for Denver, Colorado. It's the first place my wife and I went after we got engaged. I just love the mix of nature and tech and weather.
Very good. What's one brand you especially admire?
I think on this one, it'd be the New York Times, partly because of their transition over time from just a newspaper to what they are today and in so many different facets and a direct-to-consumer business just like our own.
They're across the street from us, so whenever you visit, we can gawk at their building. What was the last film, book, or podcast that you consumed?
So every morning, I start my day heading back to the New York Times with The Daily as a podcast. I'm a girl dad, so the last movie I saw was Spirit, Ride Free, because my daughters love horses, and I'll go all of them. The last book I read was Uncanny Valley, a memoir, which was just fantastic.
Wow, with 1 second to go, you finished that. That's very impressive. And you gave us more information, which is always appreciated. Now it's time for Tell Me Something I Don't Know. This is the segment where we each bring an interesting number, stat, study, or finding that most folks wouldn't know about, but will be highly relevant to brand marketers. And we're going to be explaining why we think that our numbers matter. So here's what I'm bringing, Paul. According to startup DeepTrace, the number of deepfakes on the web increased 330% from October 2019 to June 2020. And in a study, data authentication startup Attestive found that over 80% of respondents said that manipulated media poses a potential risk to their organization. However, less than 30% say that they've taken steps to mitigate fallout from a deepfake attack. I thought this was interesting because in so many ways, these types of deepfakes are almost spiritual descendants of JibJab, but they're evil. So in a lot of ways, I just miss the old days of sending JibJabs to people that were just plain fun. But what's your take on this data?
Yeah, look, I think there's been a rise in the space over the last year and a half too, with the technology just getting better and have many more different application tools to it, where it was really hard for someone to do it themselves. The tech was really difficult, but we've seen people in the space make it really accessible to the average consumer and being able to modify and adapt their own things. So it doesn't surprise me that there's a rise. I've actually had people tell me a lot, hey, why doesn't JibJab do different things with their face? We have an enlarged face with a marionette jaw for a reason. We're not trying to replace reality. We just want to have fun.
And I honestly do love that, especially as a consumer, because JibJab to me is just fun. It harkens back to a simpler time. And again, that's just for me, but it does kind of strike me how technology just keeps on getting better and people find unexpected usages for it.
Absolutely.
I think another thing that I will say, at least in my study of the sector, is that there is some hope, and there are a lot of really interesting companies that are trying to combat deepfakes. So in that sense, I guess you could say there is some hope. It's not like, all the news is gray.
Yeah, everything is a lot of fun when you first put it out there, and then there can be different iterations, and it's always fun to see what direction it goes from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you, so do you have anything that you wanted to share with us? Any particular data or study that you're, just particularly fascinated by?
Yeah, I'm going to use data that we see on our side, and we may be talking about it a little bit more later on. But over the last year, we've seen a lot of increases on things that make people happy, which may be a bit of a surprise based on the previous year that we've gone through. But we've seen all of our cards focus on happiness and celebrating family-based holidays where people can be together, a large surge in their usage, and people wanting to laugh over the last year. I found it really exciting because it was a hard year for so many, and a very difficult year, and see that brightness come through can speak to a lot of our marketing strategies, our product strategies, and how we communicate with people during this time.
Yeah, I definitely want to ask you more about that in terms of the categories that are growing. And I think that that's got to be such a really interesting space just because consumer behavior has changed so much, I feel like, over the last year and a half.
Absolutely. We have always been in the business of making people happy. People have deemed us the online cockroach because we've been around for so long, but we've always had that central vision. And we looked at the last year as a challenge of saying, how do we continue on in that mission with everything that's going on around us? And we tried many different ways, and I'm excited to talk about what worked.
Yeah, let's definitely talk about that some more in a second. Now we're going to take a quick word from our sponsor, VTEX, and then we'll be right back.
Everyone is talking about digital transformation, but what does it mean in real life? Digital Insider is a new podcast series about the digitalization of retail, where business leaders, academics, and thinkers discuss how businesses are transforming and give their perspectives, practical advice, thought process, and lessons learned. Go to digitalinsider.com to learn more, or listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, now it's time for our brief case study where we look at a recent brand campaign or deployment and discuss what went right and some learnings for next time. But before we jump in, Paul, I have to ask, JibJab launched in 1999, so you've been around for ages, but I feel like the brand has certainly been under the radar at certain points and then very, very much in the zeitgeist at other times. So can you take us through about 22 years in about 60 seconds?
Absolutely. So the company was founded by two brothers in a Brooklyn garage with the goal of making people funny and putting out funny videos. It was right on the rise of the internet. It was before YouTube when they first hit their big success with This Land, the George Bush, John Kerry political satire that put them on the Tonight Show couch, and ABC News People of the Year. Ultimately realized that that's not something that could make money. Viral videos are really hard to find success and really hard to monetize. And in 2007 said, hey, how can we provide utility to a customer? And they looked at the greeting card space and said, if we can help people say happy birthday, happy anniversary, or Merry Christmas in a really fun and creative way, they're willing to pay for that service. And we've been one of the oldest direct-to-consumer businesses since 2007 and working on that mission ever since, as well as all of our new products that have been coming out over the last year and a half.
And that is, I think, to me, what's really interesting about you guys is the fact that you have this thing that makes people happier, to your point, that you're really trying to grow and engage users at a point where consumption habits have changed so much. So I'm really curious if we can talk about how your users' consumption habits have changed in relation to 2020, not to mention 2019, the last quote unquote normal year we had.
Yeah, so it really is important to understand the brand and how we've approached challenges over time. We've always said that we're not going to be a closed system and we want people to communicate on our platform. Our goal is to allow people to be funny no matter where they're having that conversation. So in the very early days, before YouTube, it was how can we make things as easy as possible to share via email? And then when the Facebook wall opened up, we said, how can we make our content as easily shareable there? And that's just changed over time. And one of the biggest shifts for the business was in 2016 when Apple opened up iOS 10 with their iMessage extension and starting to enable conversations to happen and apps to integrate into their messaging and text conversation. And we completely changed the way we think about content and integrating content to live in those text conversations. So we've had the longevity that we had because we are changing with this environment. It causes us to make a lot of bets and seeing which ones play out. But we've always been adaptive in how we're approaching our content and how we're distributing it.
So to me also, and thank you for sending me in advance a few exclusive data points because I'm obsessed with data. I thought it was so interesting to look versus 2019 and see some of the highest growth categories for you guys. And, what does that mean about consumers today? Like one of the categories that really popped for me was anniversary, which was up, I think it's over 195% versus 2019.
Yeah. When we look at all of our top categories versus 2019, we really saw shifting behaviors in how people celebrate different events. And our anniversary cards range from you wishing a happy anniversary to your significant other and you wishing a happy anniversary to someone else. During the pandemic, we saw fewer people were going to stores and getting physical cards or couldn't be together with somebody to celebrate that day. And we were able to fill that void and allow people to have a personalized connection versus just digital email saying happy anniversary, and also personalized by putting your face into it. So I also am very shocked with anniversary being at the top because normally you think about it of I'm spending more time with that significant other in my house. But you know what? If you can't go to dinner, it's just an extra special thing that'll make someone laugh that you send to them, as well as if your friends can't be there for you, they're going to send you a card to wish you that as well. When maybe sometimes it would have been a paper card before.
I was almost thinking that I've spent so much time with my wife over the last year and a half that she would prefer to get a Jib Jab card from me and just have the day off from interacting with me.
You know what? That's I might be able to say the same on my side as well.
Another interesting one to me, I mean, certainly a lot of holidays, but just, the Easter growth, 87% versus 2019. What was it? Graduation, nearly 60% up over 2019. What do you account for some of these? Is this just a matter of platform growth in general, or does this say something else in terms of, things that people have been starved from, interacting with people in real life for a while?
Yeah. If we look at these numbers, 2020 compared to 2019, the growth numbers would be even more astronomical. And that's because when you look at it during the pandemic, those were the holidays that were impacted the most. For Easter, that was the first really family focused holiday that people were not getting back together because some of the shutdowns and lockdowns that were happening. And that's carried over to this year as well, because we had such high brand awareness from those events the year prior and more people just knowing about and liking those cards. And even this year, we still had some of the lack of travel or lack of togetherness to cause that. And when you think about graduations as well, we did a really big focus in 2020 on graduations because we knew so many of them were being canceled that we actually made all of those cards free last year in 2020. We didn't carry that forward this year, but I think, again, general awareness and people wanting to send those graduation cards when maybe they don't feel comfortable traveling across country like they did in 2019 or years prior.
So I think that's really a good point. I got me thinking also the very fact that you can observe all of this consumer data and see what types of things people are interested in got me thinking, how are you using consumer data? How people are actually interacting with the product, what they're clicking on the site to inform your ongoing product development?
Yeah. So there's two different areas of it. First is the actual product and development of it and what features we put out there. And we ultimately said, with the different categories we have and the different, birthdays, graduations, that we wanted to make it more accessible for people to be able to send these cards and know who they're using and what heads they're using for different cards specifically. So we've spent a lot of time on retention-based tools that make it easier for someone to say happy birthday, happy anniversary, happy Mother's Day to someone else. So when you upload a head that is your mom's head, we ask you for that information and then be smarter about our usage, knowing that, hey, people are paying $24 a year to access our cards. We want to be the place that they go to to send all of their holiday and celebration based cards, as opposed to saying like, hey, I remember I have a Jib Jab membership. Let me go look for it. So we want to be smarter about it. But more importantly than that, we also use this data to dictate what cards we create in the future. One of our key differentiators, we don't focus on quantity, we focus on quality. We get artists from the top art schools around, and we put 3 weeks to 3 months into each one of our cards with budgets that can range from a few $1,000s to hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we want to be really intentional about the cards that we create, because the difference between us and a Giphy or a Tenor or something else you can do is, you know that you can pick any card in our catalog and it will get a laugh on the other side. Where you really have to be more intentional and curate on these other platforms that could be free. And that's the value that we bring and why we use this data to dictate our content and development road strategies in the future.
I love/hate that you anticipated my next question, which is breaking through the clutter these days. It just seems that there's so many different ways to reach out to people that it's, on some level, it's impressive that you've been able to protect the price point, which is, probably affordable for a lot of people and accessible. But at the same time, you are competing with a lot of things out there, right? So, how does Jib Jab try to build a product that can be sustainable and break through the clutter, given that there's so many different ways to reach out these days?
Yeah, it's exactly that. We make the product as easy as possible to use. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, we're not trying to replace reality. I think a lot of people put quotes around it whenever I say face technology, because they think about Snapchat and deepfakes and other things. And they're like, you just put a big oversized head and a marionette jaw on it. How is that technology these days? But really, the reason why we get through the clutter is when you see it, you know exactly who it is. And it has a little bit of that nostalgia feel. But more than anything else, it's the high quality. Like I said, we're not out there making hundreds of thousands of pieces of content for free. We are partnering with music artists and labels, and we're also doing original artwork in many different creative styles so that you can find something you like that will get a laugh on the other side, yet make it so easy to use. It's 2 or 3 taps to upload a photo, set the jaw, and then you're off and sending something within 60 seconds.
And I'm glad that you mentioned nostalgia, because this is something that I was thinking a little bit about and possibly that you're tapping into. We've covered a lot at eMarketer over the last year, nostalgia and how it's kind of comfort food, particularly when times are a bit challenged. And, why do you think Jib Jab has resonated with consumers so much during this crazy year and a half? Is it purely nostalgia, or is there something else that, you're tapping into with the product?
Look, saying happy birthday or I love you or Merry Christmas or Happy Halloween never goes out of style. So luckily, we're not in an industry that we're built on fad-based holidays and events. But more importantly, I think you touched on it quite a bit. When you think about your favorite Christmas movies, they're pretty much the same every year because you don't get burnt out of them throughout the year. And every once in a while, there'll be a big hit that turns into that next movie that gets into the rotation. So similar to us, we have a wide selection of Christmas cards or Halloween cards that can be used and are popular every single year because you don't get burnt out of them. We're always adding to our catalog. And like I said, we're focused on making people laugh and celebrating events. So it's very natural to get things that people want to send and share. But I completely agree. I think the nostalgia of seeing that big face and the marionette jaw always gives people a little bit of a chuckle because it does resonate across age groups and demographics. But more than anything else, we're dealing with things that help celebrate momentous and happy occasions in most cases. And you do want to go to what's tried and true because you don't see it every single day.
Yeah, well said. Just to, I guess, wrap up, is there anything particularly interesting out there that you're working on that you're very excited to launch in the next few months? Anything you can say yet?
Yeah. So at Jib Jab, we have been really focused on making people happy with digital greeting cards and social expression that have primarily been just that, digital. About 2 months ago, we launched our beta of our first physical good product called Starring You Books that helps people send personalized birthday messaging. So you can create a book, put your face in it, just like normal Jib Jab styling, and highly curate each page if you'd like to send to that special someone as a keepsake. Because again, we want to make people laugh and have fun around special events and occasions. And then the next few months, we'll hopefully be launching things tied to some of our larger holidays that Jib Jab is known for, like Christmas and Valentine's Day as well. So keep a lookout for that. It's called Starring You Books.
That is all the time we have for today's episode. Thanks, Paul.
Of course. Thank you.
So this was our first episode. Let us know what you think by emailing podcast@emarketer.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'll be back in 2 weeks for another episode of the Behind the Numbers Brand Anatomy, an eMarketer podcast. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by VTEX.